Hello.
Hi,
Hi, Sophie. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Okay, a little bit of a different stream this time. We don't have Christine tonight, which we're sad about. So, hi, Christine, if you're watching. Yeah, so this is Sophie. She has happily asked to join this month in reading Sea Wife. So, Sea Wife was our pick for the month of October. I know we're doing it a little later than October. We had some scheduling conflicts between we're three full-time working women, so we're trying to make this work.
For sure.
Yeah, so thanks for joining us, Soph. I'm
Yeah,
real
I'm
happy.
excited.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, so we're the Book Buzz. We pick a book each month and we try to discuss at the end of each month of time, usually. And so this month we picked Sea Wife. Sea Wife is a literary fiction. It is dual perspectives between a husband and a wife. And it goes pretty deep into a lot of themes, but we get to see the husband and wife's perspective. So basically, Juliet is a poet and she's struggling with a lot of stuff. She's struggling with being a mother and trying to finish her dissertation. And Michael, her husband, is more this optimistic guy. He has this dream to go off on an adventure and buy a boat and sail around the world, I believe, at first. But they end up sailing the Caribbean. So they decide to do this as a family, and it's kind of a back and forth dialogue between the husband and wife. And also, we get to see Michael's deep and in detailed thoughts with his notes and remarks. He has like this journal that he brings along on Yacht Juliet. So they name the boat after Juliet. So that's kind of a little bit about this book. And yeah, thought we could start with how did we like this? How did you like it,
Yeah,
so?
yeah. First thoughts. So going into this wasn't the type of book that I would normally choose for myself to read. It's just not the genre I tend to gravitate to. And that being said, I think there were some surprises in the book that made it like pleasant surprises that made it interesting for me to go through. I liked the ideas behind it. I think there were a few moments where she clearly went in with a vision for it, and in those moments it really worked. Um, it's an interesting concept overall, and I think she starts to explore some interesting ideas and questions. And yeah, initial thoughts in a nutshell. I think that's it.
So what did you rate it, like out of 5? What would you rate it?
Out of 5, like I said, this isn't my typical book. This isn't what I normally go for. And overall, I had some questions about it that would probably make me put it at around a 2. I'm glad I read it, but I would not read it again.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad that you withheld those thoughts from me. Wow. Yeah, I think you might be on a similar page to Christine. She's gonna post her review, but I don't think she was like fully into this book as well. I don't know why. I loved it so much then.
And that's
I
good.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. I'm okay. We have both of our thoughts then. So I rated this a 4.7 out of 5.
Yeah.
When I was first halfway, I think I rated it 5 really early when I was on chapter 2 because there was just portions of the book that like really resonated with me. I
Mm-hmm.
also think my experience did you read it
I read
or
it on, I didn't have the book, I had the ebook. So it was
okay.
maybe a little bit different experience for me.
Yeah, I think the audiobook really enhanced my experience. Like the audio performance was really well done. They had a woman for Juliet and a man for Michael, and also kids for Sibel and George. And it just felt like this family talking to me, bringing me through this adventure. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of the themes, like the heavier themes, I tend to kind of gravitate towards those. Um, and also the lighter moments too, like for example, I love to scuba dive. I love the ocean. I love like just the whole concept of going sailing for a year really really captured my attention.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of sweet moments between like the kids and their parents. And yeah, so do we want to talk about some themes then that came up in the book? So yeah, maybe we could start with, there's a lot in this book.
Yeah. I think that's like overall probably both like a good and thing about it is there's a lot happening. There's a lot that she tries to explore in a limited number of pages.
Yeah, so that's actually why I didn't rate it. Once I got to the end, I didn't rate it a 5-star because there was some weird conflicting thoughts at the end. It just felt like it ended. It didn't feel very complete. Yeah, so there was too many.
I would agree.
And I kind of wanted to just keep in the moment on their adventure, on their journey, instead of keep like you were constantly being pulled away. I don't know, this is the most unique writing style that I've ever read because it's not like you have to really try to follow along because sometimes you don't know who's talking. You're like, okay, this is Juliet, and then on the same page it's Michael. So it's this back and forth. Right. So that's kind of why I didn't rate it 5 stars. Whereas at the end, it just felt like I wanted a different
more closure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
No, I understand.
Who is your favorite character then between Juliet and Michael?
I feel like I didn't connect with either of them because like we got to see things that they were struggling with, and there was some moments of levity where you could see like you had glimpses of what they were at their best as a couple and as a family, but then the rest of the time it seemed very focused on their specific problems, what they're struggling with, like within themselves, within each, like as a couple. I don't know. Did I have a favorite between the two of them? I found them both hard to read at different times, and I found them both. They had their moments where you're like, oh, this is a nice insight into the character. I didn't find either of them particularly, I don't want to say likable, but like relatable. Like I was like, okay, kind of ambivalent about both of them.
They're a little hard to be likable because they're so you're kind of going into their mind and their deep thoughts. Right? So they're kind of spewing at you their worldviews and their troubles. Yeah. So I can totally see what you're saying.
Do you have a favorite between the two?
Yeah, I don't think I have a favorite. Maybe more Michael because I found him very snarky. Yeah, I found him pretty snarky, and a lot of his political commentary was pretty funny to read. Just like hearing from a male's point of view and his views on life and freedom and everything, I just found he was like very opinionated. He was very strong in what he believed. So
and I feel like because of that, like we got one chapter with Michael where you clearly lay out where he's at in life, what he wants, and how his views differ from Juliet. And I don't think we get an interesting, like a paragraph like that goes into him as much at any other point in the book. And I feel like that's such a shame because it sets up like this great moment where you're like, oh, like where is this going with their relationship? How do they resolve these tensions? And are we allowed to spoil it?
Yes. So the discussions, yeah, I say yes because that's the whole fun. If you're here, we've supposedly read the book. So yeah. Yes.
Okay, great. So they set this whole thing up, and you really want to see where their relationship goes and how the trip resolves or doesn't resolve the issues in their relationship. And then he just dies. And there's no answers to his questions. You don't know if he found what he was looking for. You don't know so much about him. You only see like the aftermath on the family. And that's one of the things that I feel like I would have loved his character so much more if I could see, like, was it working for him? Was this not working for him? Was he getting what he needed out of the trip? And it just dropped off the face of the book.
Yeah, Michael's he's like the yin to Juliet's yang, because Juliet's heavily dealing with depression, and he's more optimistic. He has a more positive view in some ways, and he can't really relate or understand what she's going through, though he tries to be there for her. But you're right. Like, that's the ending does leave you with a lot of the anticipation of why I wanted to continue reading was to have those questions be answered. There are moments where they're kind of like, oh, if you just die, then you don't have to go through a divorce with me then. So they kind of both don't talk about their issues. They don't talk about the fact that they should probably be getting a divorce, but they just don't. They instead move their family onto a boat.
Yeah.
And
I think that's what was a frustrating part of the ending for me. And that is how I think I left it. I was frustrated. The whole point is that it was this big crazy experiment with their life where they were going to make like a last-ditch effort to save their relationship and bring their family together. And that isn't resolved in the end. You don't know if that made or broke their marriage. It just ended. And like you explore Juliet's depression at the beginning, where she's struggling with her role and her identity as a mother and who she is as an individual. And at the end, you just see her having fallen apart because of Michael's death. And she's still trying to be a mother. And then you don't, like, and that's it. You don't explore their relationship to whatever natural end it would have come to, because the whole half of the tension is written out of the story.
Exactly. I think the strongest part of this novel is like the first half, and there's a lot in that first half that I resonated with definitely. She explains how her depression is very linked to her becoming a mother, and I think the reason why I resonated with that was because it's a fear that I have. Having kids seems like such a daunting, wonderful experience, but also like such a
life-changing
thing,
like in every way. Yeah, absolutely.
And so here we have this character who, it's basically she embodies everything that I fear about becoming a mother. Like, was on the complete end of that spectrum, and it's really, really difficult to hear her. But I think it's difficult to read her go through this. But I think we learn later on in the book that she actually went through some trauma as a child.
Right.
And I think that has a lot to do with why she's struggling now in the current, present, when she is a mom. It might not necessarily be because she's a mom, but it's that all that
unresolved. Yeah. And remind me if I'm misremembering it. I'm pretty sure there was part of the tension is that there was some kind of abuse that happened to her, and her mother didn't help her, didn't do anything to stop it. That was and they she also
under the rug, didn't believe her at first.
And then at the end, it sort of shows her trying to rebuild some kind of relationship with her mother, because her mother is now taking care of her through her depression as an adult. And that's another layer that I feel doesn't get used to its full potential. Like, we're left in a different kind of emotional turmoil, but just emotional turmoil. And it's not really an arc. It just sort of like starts to like take off and like almost gets to the clouds, and then we've landed again and we're back in the same airport. And I'm like, what? Where did we go? Why did we get on this plane?
It's like it just starts and then it catches you and you're there, and then it doesn't really get resolved.
And there's a lot of them. There's like a lot of planes that take off in this, and you're like trying to keep up with all of them. Like, she's building all these different layers to dig into. And I think she had a lot of ideas that probably could have gotten put into a series of books. Like, if it was the same family, I could have seen it being like a series as they go through different stages.
Right.
Or even separate books, like not even the same series, just take the same ideas, put them in different books, different characters, different whatever. But there was just too many ideas in one book, such that I think she wrote herself into a corner.
There are some interesting parts that could be made into different books, like you were saying.
Absolutely.
There's portions where they are all going through therapy after.
Yeah.
And that in itself was just a small portion. And you're like, could be so much more explored there. I have this quote though, I believe this is from Michael, and I really liked this quote. We're just a hyphen between our parents and our kids. That's what you can learn in middle age. Mostly this is something a mature person can live with, but every once in a while, you just want to send up a flare. I too am here. Everybody is sympathetic until you try to make yourself, everybody is sympathetic until you try and make your minuscule life interesting, and then they're like, what's wrong with you? You think you're special?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I like his take on that. You're a hyphen between our parents and our kids.
Mm-hmm. And I think that probably encompasses like the biggest part of Michael's struggle in his identity, because this wasn't the existence that he saw for himself. And when you see in the flashback when him and Juliet first start dating, and he has a certain idea of who he thinks she is, and she is a different person. Like she hasn't gone through the same experiences, she hasn't gone through the same struggles, and like becoming a mother did change her. And I think that's a really good quote to pull, because it does pull up sort of his expectation for life versus what happened. And I think that's probably going to hit all of us. I mean, we're in our 20s. We're not quite at that stage yet, but it's something that we're starting to think about as we're planning the rest of our lives.
You get sandwiched in between taking care of your parents or feeling like you might have to one day, and your children in middle age. So I just thought that was a good quote. Freedom is a huge theme for Michael.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of one I wish this book went into a little bit more, because I think the whole concept of uprooting your white picket fence life, what we kind of call it here, suburban, modern, New York, middle class, and then moving everything onto a boat and exploring the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
That was my biggest appeal for this. And Michael seems to be pretty obsessed with this concept of freedom.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was a good theme that I thought I would bring up. It's like kind of wanting out of the rat race. And a huge part of why I rated it pretty high, I really loved the moments between Michael and his kids, where you're seeing Sibel and George have this unconventional childhood.
Yeah.
There's moments where Sibel comes in and they call up a family on another boat, and there's a kid, and they come over and they have play dates, and they can just swim in the ocean and explore the reef. Like, what a cool concept that is. I love that part of the book.
And there's a part when they're on the boat and they're on the open sea, and you have one chapter with both Michael and Juliet's perspective, and Michael adores it. Michael loves that you can't see the land, that you're sort of like the master of your own domain, like in this like blob in the middle of the ocean.
Yes.
And to him, it's completely freeing. And Juliet was like, that was terrifying to her.
She sees it as like, they're both like zooming out, and seeing the boat from like God's perspective or whatever. And it's so freeing to him, and she's terrified.
Yeah.
But what sacrifice she has to make for her partner.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it brings up a lot of questions in relationships. What if one day your husband's like, hey, I have this dream I want to pursue. You can't just dismiss it.
Yeah.
In marriage, right? Like, if it's something that you don't want, but you kind of want your partner to explore every avenue of what they want in life, right?
And it was his dream, but it was also a way that he thought would be a good way to get her out of her rut. And like, what a risk that is as well. It's where it's like you're putting yourself in a position where this is something that you're not comfortable with, but you're purposely uprooting your life with the purpose of putting yourself outside of your comfort zone and hoping for the best. And I think you do see that. You get moments where it does work to Juliet's, to her benefit, where she comes into her own and relaxes a bit, and she sees her kids playing in the water, and Like
Yeah,
she sees that things. Yeah, you have it?
yeah, so I marked that here because I thought this was significant. She goes, for people who have been unhappy for long periods of time, happiness can feel vaguely uncomfortable. They do not quite know how to submit to it or whether or not to such a submission is wise. So it's when they're on this little island of Sailor, they have that really sweet moment between the two of them when they see the kids playing, and
Yeah.
he does thank her. He says, like, thank you for doing this for us. And she kind of, the feelings of happiness is so, she doesn't know what to do with it. Yeah, that hits home. Depression is like, is awful, and you can really see how it's tainting her worldview for
Yeah.
this whole book. And even Michael tries to plead with her, like, everything that's happened in the past is done now. Like, look at what you have now, he says. You've made it through. You've made it. You've got a husband. You've got 2 kids. Like, they're sailing the ocean. You know, it seems on the outside, so surface level, so
Right.
picturesque and wonderful, but doesn't always solve everything, right?
And that's why I went into this book like I said, this wasn't the kind of book that I would necessarily choose for myself, because I hear that kind of a concept and I'm like, I struggle the idea that because someone has depression on land, if they all of a sudden make some huge radical life change, like that's not going to necessarily solve her depression. It's just going to, now she's depressed and in an uncertain environment and cut off from everyone else that she knows and loves. And, you know, and I appreciate that they, like, that she didn't just wave a magic wand and make the boat solve her depression.
Yes. It's very realistic, this book.
Yeah, and I did appreciate that she had moments, like you said, of when, like, she's on that beach and you get moments of where she's affected by her time there in a positive way. But I also like that it swings back to the other side and she still is struggling, even though they're in this picturesque place, even though the whole family's there.
It doesn't romanticize it.
No.
Right? Which is what I thought it might do.
Yeah.
It's very, very realistic. It doesn't romanticize. I think that's a lesson a lot of travelers even can take. Whereas a lot of people think going and traveling the world is going to solve their problems or make it better, but your problems follow you wherever you go.
Yeah.
For sure. Sorry, I keep looking down. I want to keep mentioning things.
Please, absolutely.
So yeah, I really, really, really loved that moment with all of them on the island. And Michael talks about big day for Sibel. Till now, she's ridden my back tadpole style while snorkeling. Today, in Sailor, she pushed off and didn't look back. We swam all the way out over the coral heads, side by side. You think those things are rocks? I asked her later. Well, it's alive. Fish represent just a tiny percentage of sea life. Proportionally, it's almost all invertebrates. So you can, my inner biology is like, this is so cute. Like, can you imagine just taking your kids out to the ocean and teaching them right from life instead of just always being at home and just reading it from a book? I think that's such a privileged thing for them to experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just love that when he's bringing her through the reef and showing her everything.
And I like, you're right, like the whole book centers around her and Juliet and Michael's issues. And even though I know they go back and forth between the two perspectives, I think Juliet is ultimately the main character because most of the book ends up being from her point of view. And then at the end, it's exclusively her point of view almost. Yeah. And so even though it focuses on that, you remember that like George and Sibel are there and they're not part of their parents' relationship. They're affected by it, but they're not part of it. And so they can experience it joyfully without the baggage of this is trying to like a last-ditch effort to make a marriage work. These are just a couple kids on a boat with an island in like a paradise. And all of a sudden, like they make a friend and it's just another friend and they haven't seen another kid for a bit. And you like that. There's those moments where you remember that it's not just the two of them, even though their problems feel like all encompassing, and like everything is focused on that. But like, no, there's kids, and sometimes the kids see the fighting, and sometimes the kids are affected by those moments, but they're still like, the kids are their own worlds that are experiencing this. And you're right, I like those moments where they focus on the kids more.
Yeah. Do you remember any of the moments in, I'm going to mention them, I had to look up all these places in Gunayala, where they meet like native people or indigenous people there?
Yeah.
I think that was such a cool aspect of the book, and it made it feel like, it made me feel like I was there in a way. Like, do you remember any of those parts?
I vaguely, I remember there was one man in particular that they became friends with, who spoke English and who spoke Guna, because he's part of like the Guna people. And I remember like they bought some supplies and some fruit from them.
Yeah.
Yeah, those moments don't stick out as much to me. Is there anything in particular that, like, is it just the fact that they mentioned it, that it was like they were coming into contact with other worlds, like other people's worlds as well?
That's kind of what I expected a little bit more from this, kind of in terms of the adventure side, where it was cool getting to learn something that I didn't know about before. Like different cultures, different peoples, different areas of the world that I've never heard of. Yeah, that was just a point I wanted to add that I liked. Yeah. Anything else that you want to add?
I mean, I have a lot of different thoughts and ideas. They're not necessarily like put together like nice in a row, but there was
just do it.
There was one that another thread that she tried to put in the book was about this older man that Michael buys the boat from.
Yes.
And he seems like a side character that you're supposed to think about a little bit, but is clearly not supposed to be a main focus of the story. And then at one point, he clearly does become the main focus of the story. Yes. And it's left ambiguous whether or not Michael was involved in some kind of murder. And you're not 100% sure where to go with it, because Michael's dead at this point, and this can't be, this doesn't ever get resolved, and it just sort of ends. And Juliet is already at this point where she's found Michael's journal, Michael's like log entry, and it might implicate him in some kind of murder. And she destroys those pages. She removes the pages from the journal before the FBI or whoever it was gonna get it. And she's, for some reason, it's played off as like a moment of some kind of acceptance, where something about that is not a heavy moment for Juliet. And I just don't understand what the point of that whole thread is. Like, the point is the relationship. The point is Michael trying to come into his own identity in his middle age, in being a husband and being a father. And then all of a sudden we get this whole thing where it's like he might have killed this man. It
suddenly becomes this thriller.
But then it just ends, and you're like, where did this come from? Why did this come from?
Where and why? Yeah, I feel like I kind of blocked that part out of my memory.
Because it's so out of the blue. You're like, what do you want me to make of this?
Yeah, because then the whole book, I'm like, I like Michael. He bothers me a little bit, but never did I think that he was gonna commit murder. Yeah, or do I think he did or didn't? Like, I don't know. I feel the same with you on that. How the book ends. So that's kind of why I docked some points off of it being a 5-star, because it just does not feel like that's what this book is about.
Yeah,
and it ends and you're kind of left. It should have, to me, not have focused on a murder. It should have focused on all the things that Juliet regrets not saying, maybe in their relationship, that she now doesn't have a chance to say. That's kind of what I thought she was doing with this. I would have liked to, he just kind of dies in the hospital and the family's not there. So you don't really get to experience that moment in dialogue. Like, you're taken away from it. So I think the most emotional part of that is when he's on the boat, he's sick, and the Coast Guard is coming to take him away. They have
Mm-hmm.
like their last encounter, and I think they have their most kind of intense conversation there, being like, "Don't call the Coast Guard, I'm dying," and she's making it so much worse. Like he's not there to help Juliet through this, and I know he's sick, but also you don't have to be like, well, if I die, then you don't have to like go through divorcing me.
Yeah.
The main climax. But then, yeah, once he dies, I like the concept of Juliet finding his logbook and getting to like having that experience, bunkered in the closet and experiencing this man who she thought she knew, but they had a hard time communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And with your spouse and having children and thinking you know this man. So,
Yeah.
but then it pulls you away, being like, well, did he murder this man? And you're like, what?
And also at that point, like the last couple chapters, if I remember right, is Juliet and Sibel in therapy. It focuses, there's a lot of therapy talk. And for some reason, and the therapy appears throughout the book because it's not linear. You get, you jump back and forth between
Which I
the
kind of liked, by the way. I just thought I would throw that out. I normally would hate that, but I think she does it well.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. I think it works well to like you follow it at like the whole story through. You're not left wondering, like, you know, Michael's gonna die before he actually dies. You know, you're not left wondering. It's not left like purposely mysterious and you're confused and it's a fog to get through. Like, you know what's happening and it's clear. What I found confusing with having the therapy all the way through is that the therapy didn't actually seem to explore her inner world. It doesn't tell you about all of her feelings or about more reflective things that give you more insight to her inner world. It's used for exposition because she's saying, well, then we did this and then Michael was acting like this, and then the therapist just like, how did that make you feel? And it kind of goes into her feelings, but it's a lot of it is used for expositionally, and I feel like it's a bit of a wasted opportunity because at that point, I mean, I know she's in shock, her husband died, but she's like emotionally very one note, like depressed, which is a realistic thing, but sometimes novels aren't meant to be 100% realistic. They're supposed to show the realism, but then dive into the depth of it a little bit to explore what actually what a person goes through. It's not just meant to reflect reality, it's meant to make a comment on reality.
Kind of why I mentioned that this book feels like, when I was listening to it, like they felt like real people telling me the story of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's real. It feels so real. So I agree with you on that.
And with Sibel, like Sibel's also in therapy, and the author made a choice that I wasn't 100% sure what it was supposed to mean, and so I can't say whether I liked it or not. But Juliet, at least in the ebook, Juliet's text was aligned to the left of the page, and when her husband was talking, Michael, his text was on the right side of the page. And then when Sibel's in therapy, the text is aligned in the center of the page. So I don't know what kind of comment it's making about whether like she's some kind of a connection between her parents. Like children are a blend of their parents. Like they inherit certain attributes from both, but children they're not a link between them. Like, unless it's the only thing keeping their marriage together. I don't know if that's what it was saying.
It seems like it, though. It seems like their kids.
Yeah.
What else was keeping it together?
And it was definitely a big part of it. But again, like Sibel's part was only used expositionally. She was talking about what was happening from her perspective. And again, like I said, like books or novels, I should say, aren't necessarily meant to just reflect reality. You make a comment on it, and just having like showing a 7-year-old's pain in therapy, even if it's realistic, that's not. You're making the reader uncomfortable without necessarily a purpose, without necessarily furthering some kind of story development or character development. You're just showing pain, and that's not like necessarily deep or artistic. It's just it could just be uncomfortable sometimes. And so I think that's like overall my biggest critique of the book is that sometimes it opens up a lot of questions that it doesn't dive into and explore fully, and it doesn't leave you. It's realistic in that you leave not necessarily having answers, just like in real life you face conflict and you don't necessarily have answers. But when I read books like this that ask really big questions, I at least want to see like an attempt, a solid go at being like, I don't know, but I think that this might be a lesson to draw from this, or like this is, an experience to draw from this. And I didn't see that, and that was a frustrating aspect of it.
Exactly. I like how you say it's a novel shouldn't be necessarily just like reality, but a commentary on reality, which is, I think, what you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I really like how you put that. Because I think initially I really like this because it's asking the questions that I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And you just put it really well. Why I didn't fully give it 5 stars is you aren't left with any sort of concrete, okay, so this is a commentary on depression, and it's just, she never really gets better. It almost gets worse.
Yeah, it does get worse because she still has the same problems. Well, she has some problems before. Obviously, her marital tensions are gone, but she's still, like, it ends, if I remember right, it ends with her quoting a female poet that also struggled with her transition to motherhood. And she quotes a poem, and you're just not 100% sure what you're left with. It's like, it seems to be saying that her biggest turmoil comes from being a mother and what it means to be a mother, and giving up your identity for other people to take care of them, to grow, like to nourish them, to let them grow to their fullest, maybe at the expense of your own development. And it just seems to try and put a neat bow on the whole book, but so much of the book is not focused on that. Actually, most of the book is not focused on motherhood and being a mother. Most of it is focused on relationship with Michael, with like motherhood sprinkled in through. So it seems odd to leave it there.
Totally. So I guess with all that being said, then I guess you did say a little bit of how you might wanted it to have ended instead, or yeah.
I mean, first of all, the book should have been like 5 books. I think that, like, she had good ideas. She had good themes that she wanted to explore. She had good issues and struggles. But I think she just tried to fit too many ideas, too many threads into one book. And I don't know that it was possible to wrap it up neatly, just because of the format. I don't think you could have without adding 600 pages.
I think I watched an interview of her. I could be wrong. I don't think I remember, but I think she said that she did struggle with the ending, or at least completing or writing this. I'd have to check that. Because I was watching interviews like long before I decided to pick this up. And maybe that's why. Maybe she did have like she started really strong, and then she had a hard time maybe stringing all these ideas together. Yeah. I guess my anticipation going into this was I thought there would be more, it's very literary. I didn't really expect that. I thought I was hoping there was going to be like more adventure, like out at sea, but instead.
So when you mean literary, you mean like it was very like just focused on like talking about their feelings, or like what do you mean when you say literary?
So when I say literary, it's you're very in the character's head, and it's less about the plot. Whereas I really like literary, and I like the aspect that we're getting very detailed. Like we're getting into the heads of the characters, but I wish there was still a little bit more to the plot that didn't involve that like murder mystery at the end.
Yeah.
I almost wish Michael like didn't die, and they.
Oh, I 100% wish he didn't die.
Some sort of other conclusion.
Yes, absolutely. I think that I don't know how the book should have ended, but I know that he should have stayed alive. And there should have been some kind of something happened with their relationship.
It almost leaves people who might be dealing with similar issues. It leaves them a little, like you're saying, it's supposed to make a commentary of, maybe not everything has to have a happy ending, but at least a little bit of a happy ending would have been helpful maybe to the readers who are possibly going through similar issues, that not everyone's partner is just going to die in a freak accident.
Oh my God.
The issue solved. It would have been interesting to see, unless just ending in a divorce is super boring and not.
No, but look, at least that would be the characters making a decisive choice. They've gone through this journey. They've been affected by it. They've thought a lot about it. Whether they choose to stay together and you see them like work it through, or have fights, talk things out, compromise, those are all choices, and it would be a decisive choice that they're making. I think it would have been more interesting if they'd chosen to stay together afterwards, because then you get to see like marriage is a choice at that point. You're choosing to do this. Every compromise you make, every joint decision you make is a choice. And I think that would have been interesting, because you can see the choices they made at the beginning, how they spoke to each other, versus at the end with the choices that they decided to make.
This is actually my biggest gripe with Michael, because I think Michael, he makes the choice for the family, and he made his choice of what he wanted. And this is what scares me about marriage, is like, you as a partner just have to go along with things sometimes. And if Juliet was not with Michael, or her own individual who didn't have this family, she would never be on that boat. That doesn't seem like who she is. She's this poet who's who's struggling with her dissertation, who it seems to mean a lot to her. But when you become, someone's spouse and you have a family, it's like Michael made his choice. It doesn't seem like Juliet had a lot of choice. He got really angry with her too, being like, I want to see you sail this boat. I've given you books. Like, you have not once tried to put effort into sailing this boat. And it just, I don't know, it rubbed me the wrong way. Like, sometimes the way he would treat her. Being like, maybe she should have tried to kind of be more involved in his dream, but also it was his dream, and she's just kind of along for the ride.
And I think part of that is just looking from Michael's perspective on that. She has been in a depression for years, to the point where she hasn't even touched her dissertation in like 8 months. She hasn't worked on it. He's in a marriage, in a relationship which feels very one-sided, where sort of, to put it in like a kind of hyperbolically, like he's the only one that's alive in this marriage. Like she has just so many struggles, so much that she is dealing with, and she doesn't believe that she can do anything. She's in a place where she has no self-confidence. And I think when you see Michael flare up, I think that's him wanting, I don't think he's trying to beat her down. I think it's frustration, and he wants her to rise to the challenge. He wants her to fight for herself. He wants, I think if she got angry back at him in those moments, I think that would be almost a win. Not a healthy win, but it would be something where he's getting a reaction, and she's, she comes out of her stupor, her shell.
And I think I appreciate that about this book. I know we were talking about it being too realistic, but also if you're somebody who has never known anybody with depression, and how hard it can be to have a partner with depression, this accurately, I think, depicts it, where, just like you were saying, he's getting upset because he doesn't see her getting any better. He's fighting. He wants her to fight for her life, to, he does describe her as being a lively person before becoming a mother and everything. He wants to see that part of her again.
Yeah.
And that's what's really great about this, is it's a really accurate depiction of how hard it can be to someone who's depressed.
Yeah, and I know I before I made a comment about realism. Realism isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like the dialogue is quite realistic. Like I'm sure you could see many couples fighting and having the exact same conversations that they have. And that kind of realism, that doesn't bother me because it's with a purpose. It's showing you the dynamics of the relationship. It's showing the struggles with it. And you were saying about marriage before, how what scared you is that like Michael had set his sights on going on the boat. Like he had already made up his mind. Well, the struggle also, I think, is from Juliet's perspective. Like she's forced to, if she like has to choose, does she want to keep fighting for this marriage, or is she saying no to the boat? And like that's a clear break. From Michael's perspective, he has gone years with struggling. It is, you know, you support your partner through their depression. You want to see them better, but it is a struggle and it's a certain burden to bear, and it can cause a certain rift, like an emotional rift between two people, where she struggles because she feels like she's alone because he doesn't understand her, and he feels like he's alone because she's so entrenched in her own struggle and her own illness that she can't be a part of everything that he wants. And like they're just moving at different speeds and different rhythm. So it's not just that he made a choice, it's that like when you marry someone, you're marrying who they're going to become, you're marrying their struggles. So like she married his needs and his need to like fulfill himself and to feel like he's exploring every part of life and not just being pulled through it without his. I think choice is a big thing with Michael. Like he, even down to their fight about political views, his whole thing is choice. He wants to be able to choose his life and not have it dictated to him. And I think Juliet feels like she's sort of pulled through life, and like sort of life happens to you and you deal with it as best you can. And when they got married, like they didn't know that Juliet would have her struggles. They didn't know that Michael would have his struggles. And so that's the point, is that you have to decide whether it's worth fighting for. You have to decide what choices you're going to make to honor both people.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think when she like possibly a person who's not depressed would see this as an adventure. Like it would be a completely different storyline with a person who's not depressed, because she's viewing the world through these glasses that like
it's like
dark colored glasses where you can just see her struggle through this whole thing, whereas someone who's not depressed would be like, wow, this is such an exciting opportunity, or they might come at it in a different way, and you can like really see it throughout the whole book. She's just struggling with every single thing.
And you know what? Now that it's interesting you bring it up, that like, what if she didn't suffer from depression? Maybe Michael wouldn't even have felt the need for the boat. Maybe he wouldn't have felt trapped in the same way and have the same need for freedom. Maybe, you know, they would have been able to do a lot of mini adventures, and so it wouldn't build up to be this need for this huge, enormous life change.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, I just, she's viewing the world so differently than possibly a person who is not depressed, and it taints like their whole experience, whereas she could have possibly made more of an effort to view it more as like an adventure, an exciting opportunity, this once in a lifetime thing, because it's only a year, right? And
like their kids are only going to be at this age for so long, and like part of it is that they want to give them that experience, and it is an adventure. It is an adventure.
She's the worrier, though. I think Michael's really wants to give them that adventure, whereas Juliet is more worried about them not growing up in like regular schools, or do the kids go to school? Like, do they do school on the boat?
I think they learn a little bit on the boat. Like they talk about doing school hours during the day where they're teaching them. I don't know. They don't really discuss it more than that, I think.
Yeah. They just pull them for a year, like just the school of life out here. I'm pretty sure they were learned more in that year.
Yeah, like what?
Grade they
Their
were
daughter is like grade 7. She's in grade 2. Like that's fine. They're not going to suffer from a year on a boat.
Yeah.
Academically.
Well, I think we said a lot about this book. I'm trying to think. Before I go, I always try to think if there's anything else.
Okay, so hold on. At the beginning of this conversation, you gave the book a 4.75. Would you still give it a 4.75 at the end of the conversation?
I think I have to. I mean, you brought up a lot of good points, but I feel like I rate stuff with my emotions and not like my objectively. Like I feel like you gave it a lot of good points on the problems. But I listened to this on my evening walks, and it was a 4.7 on my first read through for this. There's something about this that I don't know, I really loved it. Like I wanted to hear the next chapter. Like I couldn't wait to go on my walks to see what was going to happen. I think there was a lot of like really good anticipation, the build up of like what happens to Michael. Like we know he dies,
right?
But I needed to know how he died and what was going to happen afterwards.
Yeah.
What you're saying is now that you know the full picture of what happens. And
the answer could stay the same. Just I'm like, having thought about it, does it change anything?
Objectively, I probably would rate it a little lower, but I still just on my first read through or listen through, I really liked it.
So you know what?
So I'm going to keep my rating.
Keep your rating. Amazing. I keep my rating as well, though as a conversation starter and something to discuss, I would give it like a 4 because it brought up a lot. And I know like before this, we've talked about it a couple times, just like initial reactions, and it's always brought up a lot to say. So, and I think as a comment on like some of the struggles that can happen with like a couple, family, and modern life, I think it's a really good book for that kind of stuff. That being said, it's still a 2, and I probably wouldn't read it again.
I feel like I am going to read parts of it again, and because we talked a lot about themes with the characters, but I think it's really hard in these kind of discussions to talk about the writing, and I think in a lot of parts the writing was really like I really liked. I thought it was beautiful in some parts. You could really tell that she made Juliet an English major or a poet, like just the way Juliet is. I think like little details like that, where she uses just such flowery language for Juliet. And also because there's stuff that I forget when I read books. Like there were parts where like just little beautiful things, like when they're talking about I think it's Michael taking the night watch, and he's talking about how big and bright the moon is and how beautiful it looks reflecting on the black ocean water. Like little moments like that, I'm like, ooh, I kind of wish I was in the middle of the ocean in a boat right now. Where it brings in that sense of like wonder, and what they're doing is actually really scary, kind of big. So like as a whole, we've talked about it, but there's like tiny paragraphs that I kind of savor that made me feel something. So yeah.
That's a downside with ebooks that I rent from the library. I can't highlight or take notes like I would if I bought the ebook. So I might in the future just get a physical copy, and then like you can dog ear it, you can underline passages, because you're right, we haven't really done justice to those moments in the book. Like I said, she chose moments that were really amazing that stuck out in the book, and I can't comment on them because I just don't know about them.
To do it in a 1 hour discussion, and especially because I'm terrible also at making notes. Christine actually had this the whole time, so I was reading on an ebook at the start before I moved to an audiobook. And also the audiobook, you hear the emotions in the characters. Whereas if you're reading it, like I'm looking at some of this stuff, and I think I would have liked it less if I had read it. Because you don't
interesting.
possibly the same emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It's just me, but yeah, I think there's always stuff that I forget when discussing, like little passages that I'm gonna try to do better at maybe marking those down like throughout the month so that I can show people. But yeah, there were just like little paragraphs of writing that I just from their journey of like that one moment about the moon like shining so brightly over the water. Like I like kind of flowery descriptions like that. So I'll keep my rating. But you make some good points. But
no, keep it. Amazing. This is why it's good to have discussion, because we don't agree on everything. And that's great.
Very true. Yeah, I feel sometimes after an hour of discussing, it's like very exhausting, but I feel like I could say so much more. Is there anything else you wanted to add? I feel like
I think this was pretty comprehensive. I think it got through everything that I feel about. Actually, that's not true. I'm probably going to have other things to feel about later, but this got through a lot. This was good. New ideas definitely came up during this hour.
Anything, let me know, because of course I'll always want to like ongoingly discuss with you. I'm thinking of also continuing to post of books that we've read in the past, maybe like a post here and there on our Instagram page. Like, what do you think about that?
I think that's interesting. I think it adds to like another like a list of light reading, because I'm reading this month's book as well, The Priory of Orange Tree, but I have side books on the go as well. So it's always good to see what others are reading, and just cast a wider net.
Okay. Because if I go through it and I find some more quotes, like I was thinking of maybe posting some more quotes alongside whatever we're reading.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much for joining us this month, though.
This was a pleasure. Thank you.
I'm hoping it'll be the end of December for The Priory of the Orange Tree, because it's one heck
of a long
book.
Yeah.
I said I didn't start, but I'm on like chapter 2. Kind of behind. We're already at the 15th of November. What is happening here? So yeah, it'll be the end of December, and Christine will be with us again, and it's going to be all three of us discussing. We're really happy that we have another person to bounce our thoughts off of.
Yay! I'm happy to be here. This is a good time.
Awesome. And also, I'm starting to think about 2021, the upcoming new year. It'll be here before you know it. And what our goals might be for next year. We have 12 books, 12 months of the year, and I'm kind of already starting to like tinker in my mind what are the best books that we should pick, or what we should think about for January. So if you have any thoughts on that, let me know. If anybody watching this has any book suggestions, we are happy to take those.
Awesome. Perfect.
Okay. I'll let you go now. Mwah.
Mwah. It was a pleasure. Nice to see you, Jacqueline.